Nic Nicaud, thanks so much for coming on the Infinite Banking Radio podcast, man. How's it going?
Going pretty good. Thanks so much for having me on here. I love your love the channel and love all that you've done to educate people across the country, Nolan.
Well, I appreciate it. I know it's kind of the hidden secret that everybody, all the big banks and all the corporations know, but when you take it down to the you and me level, for whatever reason, people don't seem to be wanting to do this because they hear the word insurance. But man, tell us more about your business. You know, how you got into this. Like I said in the intro, just how creative that you get in real estate and how you couple it with infinite banking. So, man, get into how you got started.
Yeah, perfect. So I've sold real estate, continue to do that to this day for the last 17 years. And my wife and I started picking up some investment properties and just trying to create some passive income. And we made it through the recession and started to think to myself, man, this is a lot of work. Heat and air go out, people don't pay rent. And I try to think through different channels. So found out about infinite banking through people such as yourself, Nolan, and really just went down that avenue, tried to figure out more about it. And once I found that avenue, I just started stacking money into that infinite banking. And then over the last couple of years, what I've done through that is I've kind of started a hard money loan. One of the frustrations that I found is every time I went to buy an investment property, if it wasn't a small bank or an investment bank, I always had to give them last 2 years of my taxes and everything short of a blood sample, right? And so what I've started to think through and process with some of my buddies and investment advisors is using that whole life insurance policy to pick up some investment properties. So that's kind of the beginning of what got me going. So we've picked up a good handful, just over a dozen properties just last year, just through the infinite banking. So that's kind of started a snowball effect for me into now what we're trying to do. Our friends have wanted to get into it. So a lot of our investors are starting to get frustrated, similar to where I was a few years back with the banks and trying to get loans. And so now I've started to lend money through my infinite banking, becoming a hard money, really trying to just be more creative with financing for people to achieve other passive income on their own. So yeah, this has been fun.
That's awesome. So before we get into the creative real estate stuff, I want to take a step back and talk. When you were first studying or learning about this infinite banking concept or this whole life insurance, can you kind of just tell your story of how, because for me personally, when I was approached on this, the guy that I now work with, I was like, dude, I don't need insurance, man. Like, I don't, whatever. I thought he was just an insurance salesman. He's like, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just study it. Check it out yourself. Do your own homework. Can you kind of go into your story about how I don't know if you had a heavy door close or you were just wide open to whole life insurance or not.
No,
I just would like to hear your story.
One of my friends who, we weren't extremely tight, but he would talk to me all about investments. And we were doing well with our investment properties. And I just told him I'd never get in stocks. And he gave me a book called What Would the Rockefellers Do? And he just said, hey, read this. You might be interested in this. And I devoured that thing in about 2 days. And I was like, all right, tell me a little bit more about this. And that started my journey into Nelson Nash, Becoming Your Own Banker, and other books, right? That started to open my eyes. And then for me, I started with a very small fund, just a small policy. I'm real big on passive income. I want my money working for me.
That's right.
I want it compounding. So this risk was a little big for me because I'm kind of like, man, I have to pay it, for what is it, 8 years minimum. And it's like, I want to make sure that I'm not losing this money. So I started small and then I started to see the potential. I've read about 10 books in the first 6 to 8 months. And it started to click in my brain for me. But I was pretty like, no, if it's so great, why have I not heard about it in the last 40 years, right?
Yeah. What's funny too is I tell everybody when they first are interested in this idea that most people say infinite banking is a scam or whatever the noise is out there. And I go, when you're talking about infinite banking, as you know, Nick, it's not even describing a life insurance policy, it's describing a behavior. It's describing how you behave
Right.
with money. It's if you take money out of an account, you just fill it back up with interest. That it's
Right.
distilled down. It's that simple. What makes infinite banking or these whole life policies cool is that you don't have market forces working against you. You don't
Yeah.
withdraw money. You don't have fees attached to it. You don't pay taxes in it. I mean, there's no other location where you can do that with an account where you don't have all of those market forces, working against you with your investing that you couple with real estate.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's kind of, my first like venture into using my money was to buy a duplex, and I saw the power of like, there's lots of things we can obviously delve into, like, do you pay the loan back and do you put it on top, things like that. But to see the power that, wait, I don't have to pay interest to a bank at, now rates are like 7,
Right.
give or take. I saw the potential of that compounding interest. So this 15% interest return, now all of a sudden, now I'm getting that 4 to 8% on my infinite banking, plus the speed that I can get this money. It was truly like revolutionary for me. I grew up kind of poor middle class and never heard of anything like this. It's always
Yeah.
work hard, put your money in the bank. Then when you need money, you go get your money and you pay interest to get your money back, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's a completely different way of thinking, and it requires someone to think outside the box and to think a little
Yeah.
differently. Because again, most people have a idiot brother-in-law somewhere that says, "Don't do this or don't do that," and you just take it for what they say.
Right.
But when you actually study it, when a person, like you said, you read the books, you studied it, you went into it with an open mind. It can be revolutionary in how you view money and how, again, the banks use these policies, how corporations use these policies. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing. So, Nick, go into the second side of this. Like you said, the policy is cool. I mean, it's great, but what you do with it gives it superpowers. What are some of the things that you kind of, like you mentioned earlier, started to get into that has impacted your real estate investing?
Absolutely. So I started, as I mentioned, I bought a handful of properties through it, paid the policy back. And then I started to realize, man, with all the wholesalers, for me personally, it's become difficult to really find a lot of deals. One of my passions is to allow money to work for me, right? So it's got to always be moving, just like the rivers. I want that water flowing or the
Right.
money flowing. And so some of the channels that started to open up were my friends and investments partners, kind of in other apartment units, houses that I have. They wanted to do stuff, and I said, well, I'll lend you money. And I stepped into the hard money aspect, and I began to see my investors step away from banks, where I'm lending them the money and I get percentage of ownership of the property when it sells. I get a little cash flow. One of the things I started last year was lending money to builders. Builders have a very hard time borrowing from banks, especially in this market, right? So I have a lien against the property. I know the market because I'm a real estate. I stay within my market. I'm in the Southeast with you. And that started to open this avenue for me of really looking at the money and what are other creative ways that I can do it. So I started lending to builders, investors. Then people started asking me for down payments. I sell real estate, as I mentioned earlier. I had some sellers say, man, I need 30 days for a moving truck and to put a deposit down on a house because I'm moving out of state. I said, well, you know what? I'll lend you $5,000 and begin to say, if I give you 5, will you pay me 10%, 12%? And I started to see this whole different opportunity for me. And honestly, that blew the doors open for me. That's what I've delved into. Last couple of years, it's really hard money. I've just tried to create, for example, if I lend 50, the goal is to generate a return. And then when that when the first little bit trickles in, right? So the profit, I want to lend it back out so that I can kind of get that velocity money coming in, just really doubling down. So the hard money and then the ability to give money to a lot of my sellers and buyers has been really vital for my career in the last 3 years. And it's been fun to be a part of. And a lot of my friends are even getting involved, which is fun.
Yeah. So when you're lending these, when you're lending money to investors, builders, and the banks aren't, can you talk about, like you said, the velocity? So, uh, I have a couple clients that are saying, "Hey, I'm trying to get a HELOC to borrow money," and it's like you got to go through all this
That's
rigmarole. I mean, like you said, you literally got to give up your first child just to be able to get,
exactly.
borrow from the equity that you've built up, right? So, can you talk about when you are borrowing from your policy, what that kind of process looks like?
Sure. For me, if I'm borrowing to purchase a property, it literally is me texting my advisors and texting and saying, "Hey, Nolan, I need this much money moved into my account." And I have an account at my bank that's strictly for investment properties. And then that keeps the paper trail. And so once I have that money moved over, it takes 3 to 4 days. Once the money is in the account, I get the cashier check, I purchase the property. My focus for the next 30 to 45 days is to renovate it, get the rents really maxed out to market value. Then I'll spend the next 30 days trying to refinance it with a bank.
Nice.
So it's
Nice.
and then I'll take that money, say I borrowed 150. I take that money, and my personal thing is I've been stacking it on top of my policy, not paying the loan back right away.
Sure.
So that's helped generate that velocity of money for me.
100%. And it's funny
Yep.
because before we even started speaking, I use my policies in a very similar way. I use mine as simply a bridge loan to get me
Yeah.
into deals, right? So, I'm buying $1.5 million building. Actually, we're getting under contract hopefully today,
That's
but
good.
earnest money is $50,000. And so I'm borrowing it from my policy, going to go and use that to get me into the deal. And then I don't really use, because you know how it is. Some people say, "Oh, I want to, become the banker. I want to, charge principal and interest back as we fill our bucket back up
Yeah.
for that car," or whatever. Again, I think this is a little bit of IBC 202, what you and I are doing, but it's using that dollar as a bridge or helping other people get into a deal. And then you refinance into permanent debt with the bank. And then you just keep rinsing and recycling
That's
those
it.
same dollars while you're earning all that interest kind of in that squeeze period.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's perfect. I love hearing it, man, that you're getting the building too. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And that's
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, that's it. It's sort of that rinse repeat, like you're saying. It is a little. I'm actually buying a property today
Nice.
that I got under contract in October. There was a little bit of like an estate issue, but one of the things I'm trying to do is refinance two. I bought two duplexes, one in September, one in December, and it is like pulling teeth to get money from the bank. They're like, well, what is this? What is that? So my model is not necessarily shifting, but this is the frustration that I have. I've felt this pressure for the last probably 7 years from the banks. That's pushed me real deep into the IBC. It's like, man, yeah, I've got to generate more cash flow where I don't have to deal with the frustration. So, again, getting into a lot of other deals that pushed me to hard money.
100%. And I think another thing that's cool about what you're doing is, when we got clients that come in, it's like the infinite banking is kind of talking about what people do with the money, right? Like, it's not, I can't really harp on how important it is to know that the
Yeah.
infinite banking concept or the policy is not going to make you rich. It's what you're doing with the money, like what you're doing right now. Because, you think about it, let's say that the interest rate on a policy loan is 4%, for example. You borrow 100,000 from yourself from your policy and charge 12% interest. You feel, oh, I'm only making a spread of 8%. You're making 300% on their money. If you think about it, I
Right.
mean, you're making 12%, you're paying 4. That's arbitrage. I mean, that's the oldest game in the book, earning more than the
Right.
cost of capital. I mean, so let me ask this. And so somebody that's out there listening to this right now, they say, damn, that Nick guy, he's sharp. What could somebody do to start, doing what you're doing? How have you built relationships with investors, with wholesalers to get to the position that you are in today?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, for me, I've been fortunate just to be in real estate. So a lot of people have seen what I've done over the years. But one of the things that my investors, as well as myself, I'm doing now is there's many, many investor groups locally. You can get into, I mean, I think we have one on a Tuesday night, Thursday night, and a Sunday night here in town, 3 different ones.
Wow.
You can become involved in those for me, that opportunity's really increased my hard money company, where you get a bunch of investors who are young, wanting to really get into the game, where we both were, right? I mean,
Sure.
they don't have the capital. And so part of me coming in with that money helps encourage them, but also embolden them, because now they have a partner that knows what they're doing. So that's been a major contributor to my company. Just being involved. There's Facebook's another avenue. Just getting involved with Facebook groups, investment groups. Obviously, most people know about Bigger Pockets. That's another thing that I delve into. So yeah.
Yeah, and to go on what you're saying, it's because I think you and I are very similar, but for people that are out there, you can't just, hang out in the Facebook group and just
Right.
look at stuff and read stuff. It's like you got to go out there and take action. You got to like submerge yourself in there. And sometimes I'm one of those guys, and it sounds like you and I are similar, where I'm more of a shoot and then aim guy. I'm like, it's like there's something out there. I'm just going to go do it and then figure it out, like figure out what to do versus, oh, let's aim and let's really set the scope. And it's like, no, just sometimes it's more fun just to hear the gun go off, even if you don't know where you're shooting, So it's like, just do something. It doesn't matter. So this is for people that are out there. It's like, it doesn't necessarily, don't just be ticky tack over analysis paralysis. Just make a decision and go for it, because that's really the only way that you learn and you start to build some momentum. And I'm sure you experienced that. Maybe the first deal you did, you probably would look back and say, I would never do that deal again, but you did it and it got you where you are now,
Right. Yeah. It's that, speaking of compounding interest and stuff, it's the compound of the things that you learn about every deal. I was telling a friend of mine the other day, I bought a house with a credit card for 12 grand back in 2009. Should have torn it down. But the brilliant Nick, we rebuilt that thing wall by wall by wall. And I mean, after about 8 years, I finally sold it. And I was like, God, I will never do that again. So but I would never have learned that.
Sure.
Right. Without the ability to step in. So one thing, we have a wealth group here in Tennessee, and I see so many people waiting to get into the whole life, and I would say one thing, especially someone like yourself, who's kind of continuing to educate people, just get off the fence. That's the number one thing to do. For me, I was fortunate to kind of have a guy just keep pushing me. So I surround myself with people like yourself, Nolan, just continuing to help educate me on different ways that I can use that money. And then that's when it starts to click, right? You don't understand the full benefits of it, but I'm like you said, I'll just shoot, then go see, I always say, I just take paint and I throw it against the wall, and whatever sticks, I'll make my painting out of that. It's like, I'm going to just throw it up there. But, yeah, man, just getting off the fence, stepping into the game is major. Start with a small policy. But I kind of second what you said. If you're not utilizing the money it's not really the best savings account. Not saying a bank is better, but I'm saying the power of this is incredible. I have a bunch of policies. I've got one on my wife, one on two of my kids, and just slowly trying to change their wealth when it comes to, I've got a policy that'll pass down, and my wife does. And then we're using those policies in so many different ways. It's pretty mind blowing, to see what's happening.
Yeah. Oh my 100%. And I know that your time is valuable here, Nick. So one of the cool things that you mentioned, though, is that Nelson Nash, kind of the inventor of this idea, or discoverer, I'd say, he died with 47 policies. So it's like he's putting them on everybody, every insurable interest that he could find. But to go back to your point, though, Nick, it's understanding that, again, compound interest only works over time. It doesn't happen in the very first year. Actually, we do this exercise a lot with clients that are first discovering this, but you say, would you rather have $5 million or a penny that doubles every day for 30 days? And it feels like a trick question, because it is. You'll have more money after 30 days, doubling a penny, but you don't see the real growth of it until like day 28. So it takes time to build that up. So it's like, if you don't start, you're never going to have the ability to earn that compound interest. And so, again, people hear, the loud noises on the internet, the Dave Ramsey's, the financial entertainers saying, do this or do that, and whole life is horrible. And I don't necessarily disagree with Dave. if
Yeah.
you create or engineer a policy the traditional way, which is all structured for death benefit and no cash value. That's why it's so important, as I'm sure, Nick, you have plenty of guys that you work with that only structure whole life policies for cash value,
Yeah.
suppressing that death benefit down to the modified endowment contract line and pumping up full of cash as
Right.
much as possible. So, and that takes, a little bit of studying and a little bit of understanding about how these work. But if you surround yourself with the right people that know how to do that, you're going to just 10x your money that much quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it took me a little bit of time to kind of fully trust, because, for about 12 years, I was buying rentals, making really good money.
Yeah.
Flipping houses. We flipped, maybe 5 to 7 houses. So not a lot a year. But that was what the hardest thing for me was, exactly what you're saying. The compounded interest on the rental made tremendous sense to me, because property goes up, debt goes down, my income keeps growing because rents keep going up. But once IBC clicked for me and Nelson Nash kind of started to educate me a little bit more through his books, I'm telling you, man, it's mind blowing, the opportunity that is out there for every just normal person. Each and every person out there working a 9 to 5. There's so much opportunity out there.
100%.
And then I think for you, our age group, we've delved into this at a deep level. There's so many people that I'm hearing that are getting into IBC, but getting them to that next step, right? And part of that's just being creative. You're extremely creative. I mean, one, you're a pioneer in the podcasting. There's not a lot of IBC people out there. So we've talked about this, man. I just love the content and stuff. So it takes people like yourself to move that ball down the field. Some of the things that we're kind of doing are innovative here. We're in East Tennessee. But being creative is what makes things fun, right?
100%.
That's the thing.
Yeah. And so, Nick, as we close up here, you've got a really cool ebook that you wrote. Is that accurate? I'd like you maybe to talk about that and how people that are interested in learning about you, learning about your business, and how maybe they could even invest with you. How does somebody, what does that process look like when they, click that link that I'll put in the bio?
Yeah, absolutely. Biggest thing for me is just I wanted to provide some content that's really basic, but also put some scenarios in that I personally walk through. I wouldn't say I'm skeptical, as you and I spoke earlier, so what I want to do is make some concrete, factual things that I walk through. But I also wanted to make it kind of very easy to understand and answer some questions that I think, Nelson Nash does a great job answering, but are maybe not to the depth that I needed, and so that book it should be out by the end of April. And but what we've done in the meantime, I've got it's sort of like a 10 steps to help you take advantage of infinite banking. And I'm going to provide that for free to some of your people here. And that will also provide an end around for the ebook. So what I'd love to do for your people as the book continues to kind of get more attention, I'd love to give it to them just for free for signing up through your podcast here, man.
Cool. Well, Nick, that's awesome. And again, I appreciate you coming on and just sharing your strategies and your creative deals that you guys are doing. And obviously wish you guys a ton of success as time goes on, and we'll keep our relationship growing as we move into this new year, man. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Hey, absolutely, man. Appreciate all the content you're pushing out.
Well, it's not stopping. We're going to keep this show rolling, man.
I believe it.
Awesome.
I believe it.
Well, appreciate it, Nick. I'll talk to you soon. All right, brother. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, buddy.